I gave my daughter my history, my art, and every penny I had to make her an artist in Brooklyn. She thanked me by changing her last name and calling my life's work anonymous folk art she acquired. She built her entire career on my back and then pretended I didn't exist. She thought she could erase her own mother. But she's about to learn a very expensive lesson about where her inspiration really came from. Before I begin, thank you for being here. For being part of this community. If you believe in the power of a woman finding her voice and reclaiming her dignity, you are in the right place. Please, let me know in the comments where you're listening from. It means the world to me. Now let me tell you what they did to me. My name is Clara Mae Thompson, and my world is measured by the rhythm of the tides and the scent of the salt marsh that surrounds my small home here in the low country of South Carolina. I am a Gullah woman, a daughter of this unique and resilient community, and my life's work is a conversation with my ancestors. I am a sweetgrass basket weaver. It is not a hobby, it is a sacred trust, a language spoken by the hands. The techniques I use, the patient coiling of the grass bound with strips of palmetto, are the same ones our people brought with them from West Africa, hidden in their memories, a treasure no chains could take. Each basket holds a piece of our history, a whisper of our survival. My small house, filled with the sweet, earthy scent of the grass, is more a workshop than a home, and I have always been content with that. My needs are simple. My heart, however, has always held a grand and complicated ambition, not for myself but for my only child, my daughter, Simone. Simone was born with a different kind of art in her soul. She didn't have the patience for the slow, meditative work of weaving, the hours of focus it took to turn humble grass into something of lasting beauty. Her eye was quick, her spirit restless. She saw the world through the lens of a camera. From the time she was a teenager, she was taking pictures of everything. The gnarled, reaching branches of the live oak trees draped in Spanish moss, the shifting patterns of light on the marsh water, the weathered hands of the shrimpers mending their nets. She had a true gift, an ability to find the profound beauty in the everyday world that surrounded her. But our world, she felt, was too small for her dreams. "Mummy," she would say to me, her voice filled with a yearning that broke my heart, "there's a whole world out there. A world of art, of galleries, of people who will see my work. I can't become who I'm meant to be if I stay here." Her promised land, the place she spoke of with a reverence usually reserved for heaven, was Brooklyn, New York. She would spend hours online, her face illuminated by the glow of the screen, looking at pictures of art galleries in neighborhoods with names like Bushwick and Dumbo. She spoke of the vibrant, competitive art scene as if it were the only place on earth that mattered. She felt stifled here, she said, surrounded by a history she saw not as a rich tapestry but as a cage. I understood her ambition, but my heart ached at the thought of her leaving. Still, what mother does not want her child to fly? The problem was that flying costs money and we had very little. Simone's talent was rich, but her pockets were empty. She worked at a local diner, saving every penny she could, but it was a drop in the ocean compared to the cost of moving to New York, renting a studio, and launching a career. The decision I made was the single most significant one of my life, a choice that went against the counsel of generations. My family, the Thompsons, have owned land on this island since the time of Reconstruction. It was land our ancestors had worked as slaves and then bought piece by painful piece, with the first money they ever earned as free people. It was more than just property. It was a testament to our endurance. One particular plot, a beautiful 5-acre stretch of high ground overlooking the water, had been passed down through the generations, with the strict understanding that it was never to be sold. It was our legacy, our anchor. A few days before I made the call, I walked that land with my oldest friend, Mr. Isaiah Washington. He was a retired history teacher and our community's unofficial keeper of stories. He knew that land better than anyone. He stopped me under the sprawling branches of a massive live oak, its limbs as thick as my body. "You see this old fella, Clara Mae?" he said, patting its rough bark. "Your great-granddaddy, Jubal, he bought this very acre in 1868. The story goes he came here with his first $20, earned from shucking oysters for a month straight, and he handed it to the white landowner. The man laughed at him. But Jubal just stood here. All day. Didn't move. Finally, the man sold it to him just to be rid of him. Jubal came and sat right under this tree, and they say he wept for a solid hour. Not from sadness, but because for the first time in his life he owned the ground his feet were on. I reached out and touched the bark. I could almost feel the echoes of that moment, the weight of that history. The land wasn't just dirt and trees. It was paid for with tears and toil, a sacred ground of freedom. The thought of selling even a piece of it felt like a betrayal. But what is a legacy, I asked myself as I looked out over the marsh, if not a foundation for the future? My daughter's future. With a heavy heart that I concealed from everyone, I made my choice. I spoke to a developer from Charleston. His name was Richard Sterling, a man with a smile that never reached his eyes and a handshake that was too firm, too practiced. He met me at the diner, smelling of expensive cologne and impatience. He spread a blueprint out on the table, covering Simone's menu sketches with his vision of a gated community. "It's a prime location, Clara May," he said, calling me by my first name as if we were old friends. "The view of the water is spectacular. We're thinking of calling it Tidewater Preserve. Has a nice ring to it, don't you think?" He spoke of the land only in terms of lot sizes and property values. He didn't see the ancient oak where my great-grandfather wept. He saw a clubhouse location. He didn't see the smaller trees my grandmother had planted. He saw marketable green space. I felt a sickness in my stomach as he pointed to the 5 acres on his map. "So the whole parcel?" he asked, tapping it with a gold pen. "No," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "Not the whole thing. I'll sell 3 acres. The part with the clearest view of the water. But the 2 acres with the old oak and the family plot, those are not for sale. Not ever." He shrugged, his smile unwavering. The price he offered felt like a fortune, a number so large it seemed unreal. I signed the papers right there on the sticky diner tabletop, my hand trembling so badly I could barely form my name. My signature on that document felt like I was cutting out a piece of my own heart. To that sum, I added every penny of my own life savings, the money I had carefully put aside from selling my baskets to tourists at the city market for over 30 years. I presented the bank draft to Simone one evening at the kitchen table. She stared at the number on the check, her eyes wide with disbelief, then with a dawning, brilliant joy. "Mummy," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "What is this? What have you done?" "I've given you a runway, baby girl," I told her, my own voice thick. "The land. I sold a piece of it. That and everything else I had. It's for you. For New York." She wept and hugged me, her body trembling with the force of her gratitude. She buried her face in my shoulder, her tears soaking my blouse. "No, Mummy, you can't have. It's everything. It's too much." "It's never too much for you," I said, stroking her hair. She pulled back, her eyes shining. "I will make you so proud," she promised, gripping my hands. "I'll do a whole show about our life, about the weaving, about the marsh. I'll make sure the whole world knows the name Thompson. People will see my pictures and they'll know where they came from. They'll know about you. You'll be famous, Mummy, I promise." I believed her. I believed every word. I packed her bags, and with them I packed one of my finest baskets, a complex, museum-quality piece with a unique weaving pattern my own grandmother had taught me. It was a family heirloom, a piece of my soul to keep her safe and remind her of home. I watched her leave for Brooklyn, my heart a painful mix of pride and sorrow, never once imagining that the daughter I had just given the world to would one day use that world to erase me completely. In the first year after Simone moved to Brooklyn, our connection remained strong, a lifeline of weekly phone calls that bridged the 1,000 miles between her new world and my old one. She was full of stories about the city, the energy, the artists she was meeting. "Oh, Mummy, you wouldn't believe it," she'd say, her voice buzzing with excitement, her low-country accent still warm and familiar. "There's art everywhere. On the walls, in the subways. I went to a gallery opening last night and stood right next to a world-famous painter. I just feel so alive." She was struggling, she said, but it was a good struggle, the kind that sharpens you. She rented a small studio in a converted warehouse in Bushwick, a place she described as gritty but authentic, and she was creating a new portfolio of work. I would send her care packages filled with homemade Benny wafers and small, simple baskets to make her studio feel like home. My heart swelled with pride. My sacrifice was bearing fruit. But slowly, subtly, things began to change. The weekly calls became bi-weekly. The long, rambling conversations were replaced by shorter, more distracted chats. Simone's voice began to change too. The soft, familiar cadence of her gullah speech was being flattened, polished away, replaced by a quicker, sharper accent that sounded foreign to my ears. One Tuesday I called her. I could hear the sounds of traffic and sirens in the background. "Hey mummy, can't talk long, I'm on my way to meet a curator," she said, her words clipped. "I was just thinking about you, baby," I said. "I made a new basket with a pattern you always liked." "That's great, mummy, great," she interrupted. "Listen, things are getting really intense here. It's all about the liminal space between memory and object right now, you know? It's a very specific aesthetic. You wouldn't really get it. It's a city thing. Liminal space. Aesthetic." The words felt like stones in my ear. He was right. I didn't get it. She was busy, she always said, networking, meeting gallery owners, preparing for a group show. I understood. I told myself this was the price of her ambition. It was Mr. Isaiah who first introduced me to the world where my daughter was truly living. He is a respected elder in our community, a man with a sharp mind and a kind heart. He knew how much I missed Simone, and one afternoon he came over with his new tablet computer. "Clara May," he said, his eyes twinkling. "The whole world is in this little box. Let's go find your girl." He showed me how to use the internet, his patient finger tapping on the glass screen. He typed Simone's name into the search bar. And there she was. A website, a blog, an Instagram page. It was like looking at a stranger. The photographs were stunning, beautiful in a stark, minimalist way that was entirely her own. They were pictures of our world. The weathered wood of a praise house, the intricate pattern of a shrimp net, a single blade of sweetgrass against a blue sky. But the descriptions were what gave me the first real chill of unease. Mr. Isaiah read one aloud, squinting at the screen. She writes, "I document the artifacts of a fading rustic culture, exploring its anonymous rustic authenticity." He looked up at me over his glasses. "Anonymous? Rustic? She's talking about our home." She wrote as if she were an anthropologist who had discovered a lost tribe, not a daughter describing her own home. She wrote about the primitive beauty of the objects she photographed. She never mentioned our community. She never mentioned the Gullah Geechee people. She never mentioned me. The first major blow, the one that felt like a physical slap, came when I saw the online announcement for her first solo gallery show. It was a huge achievement, the moment we had both been dreaming of. I felt a surge of pride so powerful it brought tears to my eyes. But as I read the sleek black and white digital invitation, my blood ran cold. The show was titled Echoes of the Forgotten. And beneath it, the artist's name. It was not Simone Thompson. The invitation read, "A solo exhibition by Simone St. Clair." St. Clair. The name was so foreign, so theatrical. Sounded like something out of a romance novel. She had shed our name, the name of her father, of her grandfather, of the generations of proud, hard-working Thompsons who had carved out a life on this island, and she had replaced it with a fiction. I called her that night, my heart pounding against my ribs like a trapped bird. "Baby, I saw the invitation," I began, trying to keep my voice light. "It's beautiful. Congratulations. But, St. Clair." There was a long, heavy pause on the other end of the line. "Oh, that," she said finally, her voice breezy, dismissive, the foreign accent more pronounced than ever. "It's just an artist's name, Mummy. A professional name. Thompson is so common. It doesn't stand out. And honestly, it's a slave name. I wanted a name I chose, something that speaks to my art. St. Clair has a better ring to it, don't you think? It's more memorable. It's all about branding." Branding. Our family name, the name Jubal had carried into freedom, was a brand that needed upgrading. The hurt was so sharp, so sudden I couldn't breathe. She had taken the complex, painful history of a name given to us by others and twisted it into a marketing slogan to justify erasing us. But once again I made excuses. She's young. She's just trying to make her way in a competitive world. It's not personal. It's just business. I congratulated her on the show, told her I was proud, and hung up the phone, my hand trembling. I wanted to go. I wanted to fly to Brooklyn and see her triumph with my own eyes. But when I hinted at it, her response was quick and evasive. "Oh, Mummy, you don't want to do that," she said. "It's going to be a madhouse. So crowded, all these art world people. You'd be uncomfortable. And the flight is so expensive. You should save your money. I'll send you all the pictures." She was building a wall between her world and mine, brick by evasive brick, and for the first time I realized she was building it to keep me out. The silence that followed that conversation was profound. The calls stopped altogether. My care packages went unacknowledged. I was left to watch my daughter's life unfold on a computer screen, a distant, silent spectator to the dream I had funded, a dream in which my own name had been deemed unworthy. The gallery show was a resounding success. Even from 1,000 miles away, I could feel the ripples of it. Mr. Isaiah would bring me news he'd found online. "Clara May, your girl is in the paper," he'd say, showing me articles on his tablet. The reviews were glowing. Critics praised Simone St. Clair for her raw, untamed vision and her hauntingly beautiful compositions. They spoke of her as a fresh, original voice, a new star in the art world. Each word of praise was a strange mix of pride and pain for me. They were praising my daughter, but they were praising a stranger, a fiction she had created on the foundation of my sacrifice. The final, soul-crushing blow arrived in my mailbox about a month after the show opened. It was a thick, glossy arts magazine. Mr. Isaiah had ordered a copy for me, thinking it would make me happy. On the cover was a striking photograph of one of Simone's pieces, a close-up of a tattered shrimp net against a weathered pier. Inside there was a multi-page feature on her. The title of the article was "The Alchemist of the Anonymous." I sat in my favorite armchair on the porch, the one that catches the morning sun, my hands shaking as I held the heavy, slick paper. I began to read. The article was filled with quotes from my daughter. She spoke about her artistic process, about her fascination with found objects, and the beauty of forgotten histories. "I grew up in a remote, culturally isolated pocket of the American South," she was quoted as saying. "It's a place where time has stood still. There's a raw, primitive power to the objects people make and use. They aren't self-conscious artists. They're just creating out of necessity. My work is about capturing that unconscious beauty before it disappears forever. Remote. Isolated. Primitive." The words made my home sound like a primitive backwater, a dying relic she was bravely documenting. She never once mentioned the Gullah Geechee people. She never once mentioned the vibrant living culture she had been raised in, a culture that had survived and thrived through its own fierce will. She spoke of her past as if she were an archaeologist who had stumbled upon the ruins of a lost civilization, not a daughter who had walked away from her own living, breathing heritage. A cold dread coiled in my stomach. I turned the page, and the air left my lungs. It was a full-page, beautifully lit photograph of Simone. She was standing in her minimalist, white-walled Brooklyn studio. She looked stunning, dressed in a severe black outfit, her hair styled in a sharp geometric cut I didn't recognize. She looked confident, powerful, and utterly unfamiliar. But it wasn't her that stole my breath away. It was what was on the wall behind her. Displayed in a place of honor, spotlit like a holy relic, was the basket. The heirloom basket I had given her for good luck when she left. It was one of my most complex and beautiful creations, a masterpiece of the art my grandmother had taught me, with a unique, intricate weaving pattern that was a signature of our family's style. The St. Andrew's cross, stitch my grandmother had perfected. It was a piece of my soul, a tangible link between the generations of Thompson women. And beneath the photograph, the caption. The words were printed in a small, elegant font. I had to squint to read them, and when I did, my world fell apart. Artist Simone St. Clair with an antique piece of anonymous folk art she acquired, which serves as a primary inspiration for her work. Anonymous. Folk art. Acquired. The words hammered into me one by one, each a nail in the coffin of my love. Anonymous. Her mother was anonymous. My grandmother, whose hands had taught me the pattern, was anonymous. The generations of women whose skill and spirit were woven into that basket were anonymous. She hadn't just erased our name, she had erased our existence. Folk art. She had taken our sacred living tradition, an art form that had survived slavery and oppression, and she had relegated it to a quaint, primitive craft. She had stripped it of its history, its meaning, its power, reducing it to a decorative object without a master. Acquired. The most vicious word of all. The final, definitive betrayal. She had not inherited this piece. She had not been gifted it out of love and sacrifice. She had acquired it as if she had found it in a dusty junk shop or bought it from a stranger. She was posing with a piece of my soul and telling the world she had purchased it like a piece of furniture. I stared at the page, my vision blurring with tears. The magazine slipped from my numb fingers and fell to the floor, landing face up. Simone stared up at me from the page, a triumphant stranger in her white-walled world. This was not a misunderstanding. This was not about branding. This was a deliberate, calculated act of theft. She had stolen my art, my history, my identity, and she was selling it to the world as her own brilliant discovery. The daughter I had sacrificed everything for had not just left me behind. She had consumed me, digested my story, and presented a polished, palatable version to a world that would never know the truth. The silence from her end was no longer a mystery. It was a necessity. How could she talk to the mother she was pretending did not exist? For a day I was paralyzed by a grief so profound it felt like a physical illness. The magazine lay on my floor where it had fallen, an open wound in the center of my small living room. I couldn't bring myself to touch it, yet I couldn't look away. The image of my daughter standing proudly in front of my work, my legacy, which she had branded as anonymous, was burned into my mind. The pain was deeper than just a mother's heartbreak. It was the pain of erasure, the feeling of being turned into a ghost in my own life story. But I am a daughter of the Low Country. Our people have survived far worse than a broken heart. We have survived the unthinkable. Resilience is woven into our DNA just as the sweetgrass is woven into my baskets. By the second day, the grief began to curdle, hardening into a cold, righteous fury. This was not just an insult to me, Clara May Thompson. This was an insult to my mother, and all the women whose hands had taught mine. My daughter had not just stolen from me, she had stolen from them. I picked up the magazine, my hand steady now. I wrapped it carefully in a cloth, as if it were a piece of evidence, which I now realized it was. I walked down the sandy lane from my house to the home of Mr. Isaiah Washington. He was sitting on his porch, reading a history book as he often did. He saw me coming and his kind face broke into a smile, but the smile faded as he saw the look in my eyes. "Clara May," he said, his voice full of concern as he stood to greet me. "What is it? What's wrong?" I didn't speak. I simply unwrapped the magazine and opened it to the page with the photograph. I laid it on the small table between his rocking chairs. He put on his reading glasses and leaned forward, his eyes scanning the page. I watched his face as he read the caption. I saw his expression shift from curiosity to confusion, and then to a deep, profound, and thunderous anger. He looked up at me, his eyes blazing with an indignation that mirrored my own. "Anonymous," he said, his voice a low, dangerous rumble. "She called your work anonymous?" He wasn't just sad for me. He was personally, deeply insulted. As a historian and a keeper of our community's stories, he understood the gravity of her crime. "This is not a family squabble, Clara May," he said, his voice rising with passion. "This is cultural theft. That basket," he said, pointing a trembling finger at the photograph, "is not anonymous. That is a Thompson family weave. I can trace that double-coiled fanning base back to your great-grandmother, Patience. This is not folk art. This is a masterpiece of a specific, traceable artistic lineage. She is selling a lie. She is selling our history and calling it her own." His words were a bomb in a fire. He gave my personal pain a name and a context. He validated my rage. "You cannot let this stand," he insisted. "This is bigger than you and her. If she can do this, if she can erase her own mother, then the whole world will continue to believe our art is just a quaint, anonymous craft with no masters, no history. We must confront this." That afternoon he called a meeting. He gathered a small council of our community's elders at the church praise house, a simple, whitewashed building that had stood for over a century. I sat on a hard wooden bench as they arrived. Mr. Jacob, a fisherman with hands as gnarled as driftwood. Sister Imani, a woman whose voice carried the weight of 100 Gullah spirituals, and a few others. I sat with them and with Mr. Isaiah's help I told my story. I showed them the magazine. A wave of collective anger filled the small, sacred space. They passed the magazine from hand to hand, their faces grim. They saw Simone's act not as a daughter's betrayal, but as an attack on their shared identity. Mr. Jacob was the first to speak, his voice a low rumble. "I remember that girl," he said, shaking his head. "Spent a whole summer on my boat taking pictures. Said she wanted to capture the dignity of labor. Took a picture of my nets, the ones my father taught me to mend. She promised me she'd make an old Gullah fisherman famous. I guess I became anonymous, too." Sister Imani, her eyes filled with a deep sadness, spoke next. "She came to our services recording the hymns. The old ones. She said she wanted to preserve them. She recorded my grandmother's songs she carried over the water. Now I wonder what gallery wall they're being played on, what found sound she calls them. Their stories painted a devastating picture. Simone hadn't just appropriated my work. She had mined our entire community for content, taking their stories, their songs, their faces, and stripping them of their names and context to build her own career. It was Mr. Isaiah who knew what to do. There is a woman in Charleston, he said, his voice resolute. A lawyer. Ms. Kendra Adebayo. Her firm specializes in cultural heritage and intellectual property. She has worked with Gullah communities before, helping us protect our land and our traditions. She will understand. This is not a case for a family court. This is a case for a lawyer who understands that a culture is something that can be stolen. He wrote down her name and number on a piece of paper and pressed it into my hand. The fear I had felt before was gone, replaced by the strength of my community. I was not alone in this fight. I had the weight of my ancestors and the support of my elders behind me. The next morning I made the call. I was no longer a heartbroken mother seeking sympathy. I was a representative of a living tradition seeking justice. The drive to Charleston felt different this time. Usually, a trip to the city was for selling my baskets at the market, a journey of commerce. This time it was a journey of war. Ms. Kendra Adebayo's office was in a beautiful historic building just off Broad Street. She was a sharp, energetic woman with a warm smile and eyes that held a fierce intelligence. She listened to my story patiently, looking through the magazine and the pictures of my other baskets that I had brought with me. She had Mr. Jacobs and Sister Imani's stories too, which I had carefully written down. She saw the legal angle immediately, just as Mr. Isaiah had predicted. The personal betrayal is a tragedy, Mrs. Thompson, she said, her voice filled with a genuine empathy that put me at ease. But the professional appropriation is a legal transgression. What your daughter has done isn't just unethical, it's actionable. She has built her professional brand and is profiting from your unique, identifiable, and uncredited artistic work. We can fight this. Her strategy was brilliant in its simplicity. Our first step was to build a fortress of legal protection around my art. Ms. Adebayo explained that while the tradition of sweetgrass weaving is a shared cultural heritage, an individual artist's unique patterns, forms, and signature techniques can be protected by copyright law, just like a painter's signature style. For 2 weeks we worked together. I brought in dozens of my baskets, including some made by my mother and grandmother. A professional photographer hired by Ms. Adebayo documented each one. We focused on the unique characteristics of the Thompson family weave, the specific way I finished the rim with a double back stitch, the double-coiled fanning base Mr. Isaiah had identified, the intricate St. Andrew's cross patterns that were my signature. This is the key, Ms. Adebayo explained, pointing to the photographs. This is not anonymous folk art. This is a demonstrable, consistent, and unique artistic signature. We are going to officially register it. She filed a series of copyright applications, creating a legal paper trail that officially and irrefutably established me, Clara Mae Thompson, as the artist and owner of this specific body of work. It was a powerful, profound act. For the first time, my art, my heritage was not just an oral tradition. It was a legally recognized intellectual property. With the copyrights pending, we prepared our weapon. It was a cease and desist letter, drafted with the precision of a surgeon. It was not a plea for recognition. It was a legal demand. Ms. Adebayo insisted that the letter be addressed not just to Simone St. Clair, but to the owner of the Brooklyn Art Gallery as well. The gallery is profiting from this misrepresentation, she explained. They have a legal and ethical responsibility to correct the record. They are complicit. We will put them in a position where they have more to lose by protecting your daughter than by exposing her. The letter was a masterpiece of cold legal fury. It laid out the facts in stark, undeniable terms. It cited the newly filed copyrights for the Thompson weave. It detailed the testimony of Mr. Jacob and Sister Imani, establishing a pattern of appropriation. It demanded 2 things. First, it demanded a full public correction and retraction. The gallery and Simone St. Clair were required to immediately update the caption in the magazine's online edition, on the gallery website, and on all promotional materials for the show. The new caption had to give full artistic credit to master weaver Clara Mae Thompson, for the heirloom basket and acknowledge her as the primary artistic influence and teacher of the artist. Second, the letter demanded that Simone cease and desist from any further exhibition or sale of photographs featuring my designs without entering into a formal licensing agreement with me. This agreement would require her to pay me a significant percentage of any profits derived from the images of my work. It was, as Ms. Adebayo put it, a bill for her inspiration. The letter was sent via courier to the gallery and to Simone's studio in Brooklyn. As Ms. Adebayo sealed the envelopes, she looked at me and smiled. "They thought you were an anonymous folk artist, Mrs. Thompson," she said. "They are about to find out you are an artist with a very good lawyer." I drove home to the Lowcountry that evening feeling a sense of power I had never known. The quiet, invisible woman whose hands had worked in the shadows was about to step into the light. I had spent my life weaving baskets to hold the stories of others. Now I had finally woven a vessel strong enough to hold my own. The cease and desist letter landed in the trendy, minimalist world of the Brooklyn art scene like a bomb. The first response came not from my daughter but from the gallery owner. He called Ms. Adebayo in a state of complete panic. He was terrified. The last thing a gallery trying to establish a reputation for cutting-edge authenticity wanted was a public scandal centered on cultural appropriation and the exploitation of an elderly black artist from the South. The words lawsuit, copyright infringement, and fraudulent representation were a death knell to his business and his reputation. He put immense, immediate pressure on Simone. Her entire artistic brand, the carefully constructed narrative of the brilliant ingenue who had discovered this raw, rustic aesthetic, was built on a lie, and the gallery owner knew it. If the story got out, she would be a pariah. Her career would be over before it had truly begun. The call from Simone finally came a week later. It was not the call of a remorseful daughter. It was the call of a cornered, furious animal. "How could you do this to me?" she hissed into the phone, her polished St. Clair accent cracking under the strain, revealing the sharp edges of panic beneath. "After everything I've worked for. How could you try to ruin me?" I was ready for her. I sat in my armchair on the porch, the receiver held loosely in my hand, the familiar scent of the salt marsh calming my nerves. I felt a strange, calm detachment. "I did not do this to you, Simone," I said, my voice quiet and steady. "You did this to yourself when you decided to steal my work and erase my name. It was a misunderstanding. It was an artistic interpretation," she stammered, throwing out the jargon that had served her so well in her new world. "You don't understand the art world, Mummy. It's not that simple." "There is no misunderstanding the word anonymous, Simone," I replied. "There is no artistic interpretation of the word acquired. You lied. And now you will tell the truth. You're just jealous," she suddenly spat, her voice turning ugly. "You're jealous of my success. You wanted me to stay stuck there with you, weaving baskets for tourists, and you can't stand that I made something of myself." The accusation was so cruel, so detached from the reality of the land I had sold and the life savings I had given her, that it didn't even hurt. It simply confirmed that the daughter I knew was gone. "I will not discuss this further with you," I said calmly. "You can discuss the terms of the licensing agreement and the public retraction with Ms. Adebayo. The conversation between you and me is over." I hung up the phone. The public correction was my victory. It was not a quiet, private apology. It was a formal, humiliating, and legally mandated act of truth-telling. The gallery updated its website immediately. The online version of the magazine article was amended with a lengthy editor's note detailing the misattribution. And Simone, under duress, was compelled to issue a formal public statement on her own website and social media. The statement was a masterpiece of forced humility. It acknowledged that the anonymous folk art was, in fact, a masterpiece woven by her mother, the celebrated master weaver Clara May Thompson. It acknowledged that her entire artistic vision was deeply and profoundly influenced by the Gullah Geechee traditions she had been raised in. She was forced, word by painful word, to put back the history she had tried so hard to erase. He had to name me. He had to name us. A few weeks later, Mr. Isaiah came over, his tablet in hand and a wide grin on his face. "Clara May, you have to see this." He showed me a blog post from a prominent Brooklyn art critic. The title was "The St. Clair Scandal: Authenticity and Appropriation in the Instagram Age." He read a part of it aloud, The art world was rocked this week by revelations that rising star Simone St. Clair, known for her stark photographs of the American South, built her narrative on the uncredited work of her own mother, Gullah master weaver Clara May Thompson. The gallery has severed ties, and the scandal raises urgent questions about who gets to tell a story and, more importantly, who profits from it. It seems the alchemist of the Anonymous forgot the first rule of alchemy: you can't turn a lie into gold. The story ends not in Brooklyn but here in my small house on the Sea Island. The licensing agreement, which Ms. Adebayo negotiated with ruthless efficiency, provides me with a steady and significant income from the sale of my daughter's photographs of my work. But I have not used the money for myself. With the first large payment, I contacted Mr. Sterling, the developer. I bought back the 3 acres of ancestral land I had sold. Standing once again under the great oak my great-grandfather had wept under, I felt a sense of rightness, of a circle being closed. And with the rest, I have established the Thompson Sweetgrass Heritage Center. It is a small school run out of the community praise house, where I and the other elder weavers teach the art of basketry to the next generation of Gullah children. We teach them the patterns, the techniques, the history. We teach them that their art has a name, that their tradition has masters, and that their heritage is a treasure, not an anonymous curiosity to be acquired. I do not know what has become of Simone St. Clair. Her star, I hear, has faded. The art world is fickle and has little patience for proven frauds. I do not know if she will ever find her way back to being Simone Thompson. But I am no longer waiting for her. My days are full. The sound of children's laughter now fills the praise house, their small, eager hands learning to coil the sweetgrass just as mine once did. This afternoon I sat watching them, the sweet smell of the grass filling the air. Mr. Isaiah sat beside me sipping sweet tea. "Look at that, Clara May," he said softly, nodding toward a young girl struggling happily with her first coil. "You didn't just get your name back. You made sure ours would never be lost." I smiled a real, peaceful smile. I watched a young girl's hands, guided by Sister Imani, master the difficult St. Andrew's cross stitch, my family's stitch. "A basket has to have a strong base to hold its shape," I said. "Our base is strong now. Here in this small corner of the world, I have ensured that our story, our art, and our history will never be called anonymous again. And that is a legacy far more valuable than any New York gallery show."